Welcome back to the Road to City Hall. Tomorrow night, NY1 will host a debate between Letitia James and Daniel Squadron, the two Democratic candidates, in a runoff primary for public advocate. And since there will not be a contested runoff for mayor, the two candidates will have to find a way to drum up support citywide for this October 1st primary election, in which turnout is expected to be extremely light. So how do these two candidates ensure that they get their supporters to the polls? And does it make sense to even hold this $13 million primary for an office with a $2 million annual budget? Joining us to talk about those questions and much more are the four members of our Consultants Corner. Tonight we have Republicans Letitia Romero and O'Brien Murray, and Democrats Patrick Jenkins and Evan Thies. Thank you all for coming in. Good to see you.
Thank you.
This is sort of an unusual situation, and some have speculated even that this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, the argument that finally changes our runoff system when we're spending $13 million, which is more than not just the one-year budget, but the four-year budget of the very office for which they are debating and competing. We asked you to grade the chances that this might be a game changer, and maybe we'll change the runoff system altogether. Let's start with you.
Well, I gave it a C, and the reason I gave it a C is although there is a Senate bill by Perkins up in Albany right now to actually change the system, the wheels of government move slowly, and so I just can't see them being expedient in getting this bill passed. So I gave it a C. I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt it.
Even flagrant waste is not enough to move the Albany lawmakers? Is that what you're suggesting?
Flagrant waste? Moving Albany lawmakers? I'm sorry, what channel are we on? What state are we in?
Hope springs eternal. Patrick.
I gave it a D. I think it's still a democratic process, and having a high price tag, we were about 1,000 or 2,000 votes away from having a runoff in the mayor's race, and I think everybody would have said it would have been worth it at that point. So I think it's worth it. I think regardless of what the budget is, maybe the budget for the public advocate's office should be a little bit higher, considering we might need more of a voice from the public advocate with a whole new administration coming in and 20 new city council members coming in. So maybe it adds validity to that part of it.
Obie Murray.
Which office is this again? Does anybody know? Does anybody know? I mean, it is a launching pad to run for mayor. Why we spend money on this office at all right now, I still don't know. The sad thing about it for me, I think, is that this is the man or woman historically then who is in line to take over the mayor's office if something happens or if he or she ever
Could happen
doesn't
on January
finish.
2nd.
Well, whatever. I mean, just it's amazing that this office, with so little scrutiny and so little visibility, could be the next mayor without an election at some point. So I think I gave it a B plus, if I'm not mistaken. I think really, if you look at it historically, they called it the Wiener Law, and nobody even knew it had passed in the past. We got 4 years to make this move. It's a $20 million number. I can see the runoffs changing for everybody but the mayor's office at this point. But you could also work with the city charter. That's why I say change it to the law, but not across the board necessarily.
Gotcha. Interesting. Evan.
I mean, I'd like to be as optimistic. I gave it a C- because, look, we had a whole conversation this year for months about when the primary was going to be, and the Senate and the Assembly couldn't agree on that. That's going to have to come up again because we have to start working with the federal system and make that work for probably June of next year. But we're going to have that debate again. So that's not even the number one, this issue is not even the number one electoral issue that they're going to be facing in January, and this is going to be long forgotten by then, which is sad.
Since we're speculating, what about instant runoff voting? A lot of people have talked about this, where you indicate you rank your choices, and then if your first choice doesn't make it,
the interesting thing about that is it would change negative campaigning tremendously, because if you're running for mayor and she's running against you and she says bad things about you, your people won't be, they won't choose her second. And that's a typical thing that happens in these choices of ranking 1 and 2. You don't have time to build a coalition afterwards either, which is very interesting. It's a whole different dynamic to a campaign.
And everybody from good government groups to the Campaign Finance Board has said that's the way to go. One question is, can the new voting machines actually handle that? How much would it cost to reprogram them? It's logistical issues almost every time.
And it still entails legislation, and that's, you need legislation to change any of these rules.
I think the legislation we're talking about for specifically the runoff is very different than the June timeframe. And I think when you bring the June timeframe in, remember the federal elections are the same year as the Senate and Assembly are up. The city elections are very different. So you're talking about September primary, and remember, the Senate's willing to go to August primary historically. They're saying, fine, we'll do August. The Assembly says no, June rather. The Senate will take June,
but there
the
are
Assembly says
political
August.
reasons for that.
Sure there are.
Differences between the Senate and the Assembly. I'm just saying that we need one omnibus package, it looks like, to deal with all these things at once. And while we're at it, let's change the way the BOE is structured, the Board of Elections, and actually have a nonpartisan real board of elections. That's more modeled after the CFB, the Campaign Finance Board, which has been very
Evan,
apolitical.
wait, nonpartisan. How do you have a board that's nonpartisan?
Look at the Campaign Finance Board. It's chaired by a priest.
Oh wait, that nonpartisan board, the same people that stepped up and said there won't be a runoff, the same people that would not give Lou any funds whatsoever, but give Anthony Weiner money. That's a nonpartisan board. I disagree.
I think
Listen, if
they
we're going to make
actually
any
done a pretty good
changes,
job.
let's
There's
make
no
sure that
such
we
thing.
They
stop
took Thompson
voter
out of the
fraud.
race. They took Thompson out of the race.
Thompson?
Yes, they said there will not be a runoff prior to the count taking place.
By slowing down the count?
The Campaign Finance Board.
Yeah.
The Campaign Finance Board said there's no need for money for a runoff. There's no need for any of this prior to the Board of Elections speaking
Yeah.
up. They got involved in this election. It's been well written about. I don't know if you wrote about it. or
I
somebody
think
else.
I think it's a mistake. I just don't think it's a
I
partisan mistake.
certainly noticed it, and believe me, John Liu and company. And look, there were some candidates from past races. Talk to Gifford Miller about what the Campaign Finance Board did to him 4 years
Absolutely
prior. They are involved. I don't know if it's partisan
And
involvement.
the debates that you guys are having.
That's the difference.
But-
I was saying it's nonpartisan. It doesn't mean they're not making mistakes. It just
people
means
are-
that,
but
they're being nonpartisan about their
People are
mistakes.
human. I mean, theoretically, any reporter that votes has a bias to what they do. Theoretically, that's
Yeah.
the way it works.
Sure.
There
No,
are
of
reporters
course.
that will say,
But there's better ways to control it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
much better ways.
On
Jim
Monday
Lair
nights at
wouldn't vote.
least, we all like parties. So, let's get back to that in just a minute. Right now, we're going to take a short break, then we'll be back with these 4 top consultants in a moment. And remember, if you'd like to get in on this conversation, you can do that on Twitter. We are at Errol Lewis or at Road to City Hall. Stay with us.